Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171. I'm Geoffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. Good morning, Richard.
And good afternoon, Geoffrey.
So viewers, this is episode 156, Probable Causes, ? In an earlier episode, we quoted Arthur Conan Doyle from the casebook of Sherlock Holmes thus: "When you have eliminated all which is impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." This episode, as I said, is probable causes of the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171, which claimed 241 of the 242 aboard, 19 on the ground, and injured 67 people. In the absence of key information and contradiction in the official preliminary report, we, like many others, are trying to make sense of this terrible tragedy. And if nature has taught us anything, it is that the impossible is probable. Sadly, our ignorance through the lack of detail in the report gives one a large range of probabilities, and these are being canvassed right across the media landscape with different emphasis depending on the cultures involved. We are a global platform with viewers from every country in the world. Obviously, we don't have the cause, but we have our theories. We are open to all, and I stress all, possibilities, if only we had more accurate data. Unfortunately, we have a few viewers who are criticising us for our views, yet they clearly have not seen all of our videos, nor have they seen them all the way through. We in fact have canvassed a range of possibilities and look at them from different perspectives. Remember, there are many crash reports that are flawed for political reasons, but we are not saying this is the case here. And one must keep an open mind. Finally, based on the law of probability, everything is possible, because the sheer existence of possibility confirms the existence of impossibility. So, Richard, let's look at possible scenarios. Was this an engine flame out or an engine failure?
Well, that's a key question, and a number of viewers have pulled us up on our semantics and mixing up the term flame out and the term failure. So we actually published a definition of each term and what we mean by it. A dual engine failure is a 1 in more than a billion, and probably more like 10 billion chance. And in my view, it did not happen. The evidence that this was not a catastrophic engine failure is that both engines, one immediately and the second eventually, were restarted according to the interim preliminary report. You cannot relight an engine which has suffered a catastrophic failure. You can relight an engine which has suffered a benign failure. By that I mean a compressor stall, a minor bird strike, a minor fuel contamination, an oil system warning, a FADEC glitch. These are benign engine failures, and then you can restart. And we have the evidence that that happened.
So, Richard, has a dual flame out happened before?
Yep. And in previous episodes, we've discussed a large number of dual engine flameouts. I'm showing a screenshot of just a selection of the ones that we have mentioned and talked about in different episodes. And British Airways, a TACA 110, an Air Transit, a SAS 751, the Gimli Glider, Air Canada, a Hapag-Lloyd flight in Germany, an Ethiopian 604, And of course, US Airways 1549, the famous Hudson River miracle landing. In the case of Air India, Flight 171, we believe this was a dual engine flameout and an almost simultaneous dual engine flameout, like, for example, US Airways 1549, the Hudson River miracle. And quoting from that final report on the US Airways incident, at 15:27:11, just after takeoff, the aircraft struck a flock of Canada geese. The left engine, engine number one, immediately suffered a complete loss of thrust, a full flameout. And the right engine, engine two, initially continued producing some thrust, but it quickly degraded to near zero within seconds. And by 15:27:30, 19 seconds later, both engines were effectively producing no usable thrust. So, and I quote from the report, from a pilot's perspective, it was a near simultaneous dual engine failure.
So, Richard, what does the preliminary report state about a dual engine flameout?
Well, the preliminary report for the Air India 171 crash makes three key statements about engine flameout. Number one, at this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions to the B787-8 or the GEnx-1B engine operators and manufacturers. So quite clearly, they do not believe there was any catastrophic failure with the engine or indeed any issue with the aircraft. Number two, when fuel control switches are moved from cutoff to run while the aircraft is in flight, each engine full authority dual engine control, FADEC, automatically manages a relight and thrust recovery sequence of ignition and fuel introduction. And the third statement, the EGT, the exhaust gas temperature, was observed to be rising for both engines, indicating relight. Engine one's core deceleration stopped, reversed, and started to progress to recovery. Engine two was able to relight but could not arrest core speed deceleration and reintroduce fuel repeatedly to increase core speed acceleration and recovery.
So the exhaust gas temperature, EGT, was observed to be rising for both engines, indicating relight.
Exactly. So the relight sequence was successful in both engines, and that implies there was no catastrophic damage to the engine. We're showing another screenshot of the timing sequence, which we've taken from the preliminary report and from the CCTV footage, which is included in the description below. We pointed out yesterday that the relight sequence on engine one left was immediately successful after 6 seconds, and on engine two right was successful at the second attempt after 16 seconds. Engine two right flamed out first, but engine one left flamed out second only 4 seconds later. And this was similar to the US Airways 1549 incident, an almost simultaneous dual engine flameout, but not quite simultaneous to within a second. There was a small gap in the Air India case of 4 seconds, in the US Airways case, 19 seconds. The big difference between the Air India crash and the US Airways crash was that the incident with US Airways occurred at an altitude of 2,818 feet. and not at around 300 feet, as in the case of Air India 171. And the other big difference is US Airways had the Hudson River as an emergency ditching area, and Air India 171 had nowhere to go for a forced landing.
Yes, it begs the question if Air India was another 100 feet higher, whether or not they would have been able to have enough thrusters to regain flight.
Yeah, they might have made it.
Mm. So, Richard, what does the timing of the rat deployment show us? Because that's a very critical thing, isn't it?
Yeah. The implication in the preliminary report was that the cause of the Air India Flight 171 crash was due to a deliberate crew action by positioning both fuel switches to cut off. In this case, the RAT deployment should begin at around 08:08:45 UTC, and up to 2 full seconds earlier than the observed 08:08:47 UTC, as stated in the preliminary report. And I remind viewers, avionics and flight control systems have a very precise timing sequence and are logged to the 10th of a second or better. So a 2 second mismatch is notable, and it's not conclusive, but it likely rules out this scenario as the source of the rat deployment. Additionally, the fact that the rat deployment didn't occur earlier than reported suggests the engines were not simultaneously shut down by crew action at 08:08:43 UTC, because doing so would have triggered the rat sooner.
What assumptions are you making in this timing analysis?
Well, as stated in the preliminary report, of obvious assumptions, we're talking about a Boeing 787-8 aircraft. We're talking about GE NX-1B engines. The big assumption that the preliminary report is correct and the RAT was deployed at 08:08:47 UTC. And when I understand the deployed means that's when it was initiated, the deployment, and it takes maybe up to 5 seconds to fully deploy and come online. So I'm going from the initiation time. And I'm also assuming in the case that I'm putting forward that the FADEC in each engine will typically recognize an engine flameout in less than 1 second, and in the event of dual flameout will then cause the loss of the AC buses, and that the RAT deployment will commence after 2 or 3 seconds and be fully deployed in less than 5 seconds.
So, Richard, can you walk us through now this hypothetical scenario of the dual engine flameout?
Yeah. So from the CCTV, we're saying at 08:08:40, there was a right engine flameout. And at 08:08:44, the left engine fails. So then you have a dual flameout. And then between 1 and 2 seconds after that, the aircraft detects the loss of both AC buses. And at 1 second after that, at 08:08:47, the RAT deployment begins. And then by 08:08:49 to maybe 52, the RAT is fully deployed and spinning up. And this fits very well with the known timeline. A dual flameout 08:44, RAT deploys 2 to 3 seconds later at 08:08:47. And the spin up will complete, as I said, at least by 08:08:52.
So, Walk us through the preliminary report scenario then.
Okay, so the preliminary report says 080843, both fuel switches set to cut off by crew action. At 080844, engine N2 decays, generators go offline. At 080844, aircraft detects loss of both AC buses, and at 080845, the RAT deployment will begin. And then the RAT will be fully deployed and spinning by at the latest 080850. So that this timeline suggests a slightly earlier start to the RAT deployment, and we're talking about a full 2 seconds earlier at 080845, which is not what the preliminary report states. It says the deployment time was 080847. And this discrepancy, in my view, is significant when you consider the high precision of onboard systems and the narrow timeline. And obviously, the investigators have got the flight data recorder information, which is very accurate. It's synchronized with GPS time, so it's absolutely and relatively timing accurate. And two, I would say, certainly within zero point 0.1 of a second.
So, Richard, was the RAT deployment a consequence of scenario one, the flame out, or scenario two, the fuel cutoff?
And well, that's the key question. And to determine scenario one or scenario two or any other scenario, which led to the RAT deployment at 080847, we need to focus very closely on the timeline of events. Ideally, we'd need the exact FDR data with the exact time to, nearest 0.1 of a second, and we don't have that. But from the data we do have to the nearest second, it would seem to me that the evidence points more towards the flameout than the fuel cutoff in the cockpit by crew action. And the facts which support this is the statement of the time of the deployment began at 080847 in the preliminary report, but also the Boeing documentation. When you go through the Boeing manuals, it explains the RAT automatically deploys when it detects both the AC bus 1 and AC bus 2 are unpowered, which will result from both engines flaming out and their generators going offline. So we need to go carefully through the timing considerations in both scenarios. FADEC detects flameout within 1 second. Aircraft detects loss of bus 1 and 2 AC in about 1 to 2 seconds. RAT begins to deploy between 2 and 3 seconds after a dual flameout, and the RAT is fully deployed within 5 seconds.
It doesn't help, of course, that the report is occasionally vague on some of the timing when they use the word about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Richard, I know that you don't like coming to conclusions, but I'm going to ask you again, what is your conclusion?
And again, I will say I have not come to a conclusion. I'm presenting yet another scenario or two. The time of this scenario, I think, assuming at least that the statement from the preliminary report of the RAT deployment at 080847 is accurate to the nearest second, then when you consider the system response delays, if this was cut off by the crew by moving the fuel switches, both of them within a space of a second or so to the cutoff position, it doesn't quite add up. And we do know that if there was a bird strike or a compressor stall or a fuel contamination or some other issue causing a flameout, then scenario one aligns very closely with the known behavior of aircraft systems. So dual flameout, system detects AC power loss, RAT deploys. And scenario two would predict an earlier RAT deployment by at least 2 seconds, and that didn't happen. So I think scenario one is more likely a flameout, and scenario two, crew actions in the cockpit, is less likely.
So, what are the implications of this possible scenario?
Well, there are a lot of people out there blaming the pilots, and I think prematurely in their conclusion. A lot of people out there blaming the aircraft or the engines, and premature in their conclusion. And people are not considering other possibilities. We mentioned the Hudson River dual flameout. Um, this could be a similar dual flameout, but unfortunately without the miracle of the Hudson River.
Interestingly enough, the Ahmedabad airport issued a NOTAM on the 18th of June, that's 6 days after the tragedy, warning of the possible bird strikes.
Yeah, correct. NOTAM A1012/25, published on the 18th of June 2025 for Ahmedabad Airport, warning of bird concentration near airdrome and valid for the next 3 months. Obviously, we don't have the cause. We can't say it definitely was a bird strike or a dual bird strike, but we have our theories. And as you said at the start, we're open to all possibilities. And I will quote again Mr. Sherlock Holmes, when you have eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Yes, that's a great quote, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is.
Well, look, thank you for that rundown, Richard. That assessment, that theory, and as we said earlier, we have canvassed a lot of theories in our coverage, which has been extensive since the terrible tragedy. And we are not ruling anything out, and we're not ruling anything in. And the major problem with it all is the lack of clarity and the contradiction in the official preliminary report. Makes it almost impossible to come to a definitive cause.
Yeah. And we must apologize to viewers. We did say today we would be going through system disorder, having followed yesterday cognitive disorder. And we do plan tomorrow to do system disorder.
Mhm.
But if something happens in the next 24 hours and we do get more information, then we may change the running order of the episodes.
Absolutely. So, viewers, thank you very much indeed for watching. We do appreciate your support. Please subscribe to us if you haven't already. Please like us. Please keep those comments coming. They're wonderful, and we sincerely appreciate them. And do keep those tremendous questions coming. Although we are, I must say, overwhelmed, but we still do want to see those questions. We do read most of them. We reply to a few of them, but we do appreciate them very much indeed. And do tune in tomorrow. And thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, viewers.